is as we shift into a new era. Here's what was, this is what's coming. Our world is never going back to 2019, so what will the new era look like? And most importantly, what is immediate that will affect the pocketbook and the outlook into next year so we can all get ready? Thank you for joining. I'm your host, David DuByne. Right along here with Ransom Godwin tonight, bringing you through the defibrillation of our world. Check. The world's becoming more unstable. We got to put the paddles on it and electrify it to get it moving again. It is so noticeable now. For the global populace, this last 2 weeks has been a ramp up yet again in terms of breaking through the chrysalis and taking that curtain back. I don't know what it is, but every time I go out into public, there's more people that just seem to be looking around and understanding that what they used to know is the truth is no longer. They're starting to question that. It gets deeper by the minute. You know, just even this last 1 week of all these things we've seen, you know, I mean, the news headlines are full of them. I don't know if we're going to regurgitate any, but, you know, Ransom and I did want to talk about this ship incident and accident. I mean, the repercussions are definitely not being talked about in the greater widestream or mainstream media about the fertilizer disruptions. That's a big one coming in because, you know, Baltimore Port is the largest fertilizer inbound port in the United States. There's more unloading of fertilizer in that port than any other port in America. So when you think about it, how would that disrupt or delay or shrink our crop yields? And I know a lot of farmers buy out, you know, a year or so, but a lot of them are waiting for prices to come down. So how will that disrupt, especially mid-season? I know when, you know, you're getting ready to plant now, they're tilling the fields. If you've been around driving in countryside areas, you see everybody getting ready, they're seasoning the fields. Well, generally they'll apply, you know, after they've tilled once and then they're going back through again for weed control, which I'm really not a fan of putting glyphosate down before you plant, but a lot of times they fertilize at the same time. Two birds, one stone, and then they'll drop those seeds in there in another month or so, or wherever you are, where you're planting. They're getting ready in Tennessee, even though I'm not there. But how is this going to affect food production? That's one thing. You know, the military is halfway stalled because 4 of their largest transport vehicles are stuck behind the other side of the bridge. And I was seeing there's a huge amount of layoffs coming, like a huge amount, a tsunami of what they call union jobs getting laid off there. I mean, it just goes on, and Ransom's got a few other points to do. Another thing, SEC is now going to launch an investigation into Ethereum as a security. And 44 nations have now adopted crypto information sharing laws. And they're going to make it so difficult for you to own a cryptocurrency because they're going to tax you at the airdrop time. If you had, let's say you have a cold wallet and you're holding Ethereum, you keep getting all these extra tokens thrown in there from new projects for free. Well, the government's going to tax you at the price you receive them, not at the price you sell them. And if anybody knows about crypto, 99.9% of the projects fail. So if they give you a $2 token, or let's say $1 token, and then you just want to get rid of it later or even hold on to it, the government's going to start hitting you with unrealized gains at that point that you received it. They're going to make it so troublesome to even hold anything that allows you to airdrop, roping you right back into the banking system. We'll talk about that tonight because too many millionaires are going to be made on this bull run. And you know, what else are you seeing out there personally across the landscape that's not making it onto the wider global media? That's truly the problem, you know, because they're trying to scare us with all these things that are not really the core of the change of our world. They're trying to deflect you over on this side or that side to look for things. New squatting laws being put in place in Florida, so you can't squat on homes anymore. I mean, property rights in the Marxist revolution being pushed on us by corporations this time. And I released some of the other show notes from last week into our newsletter. If you decide to join for that, go to oilseedcrops.org and put your email in there. I'll send that to you every week, what we talked about. But Ransom, that's kind of the introduction. Still having my coffee in the morning. Remember, I'm halfway across the planet with you here, so welcome to the program, man. What are you seeing in the homeland?
It's just a circus show, man. You're lucky you're getting in my opinion, I think you might be going around the world at the best time possible. So you can get to see everything before it dramatically changes and is never the same again. I have been on this weird little trip about the fine tuning of the wildlife. And people keep sending me more and more articles about, how they're releasing this animal or they're getting rid of this animal or, laws made up to stop people from like ranching in different ways. And it's usually tied into some kind of animal that they're trying to say that needs to be on the land or that it should be on the land. And this includes like invasive species. And I'm just seeing this everywhere. Like, what was it today? I was looking at something where they were talking about going out and killing all of these owls. And I'm thinking, in what scenario are there too many owls? You know what I'm saying? I mean, I don't
never.
I just never. Okay, here it is from the Daily Mail. It says U.S. government plans to unleash hunters to kill 500,000 owls in 3 U.S. states to save its endangered cousin. So I guess there's having, problems with owl-on-owl violence. And so the barred owls have taken over the territory of the endangered spotted owl. Isn't the spotted owl exactly the same species that they said was going extinct, and that's why people couldn't utilize the wood on their land because they were worried that the old rotted trees that might be a fire hazard are also, a dual spotted owl habitat. So you couldn't, chop down certain pine trees or all kinds of stuff like that. I remember that being a big thing in the 90s. Where they were, trying to shut down one logging company or another because of the spotted owl. And now, like a weird sci-fi movie. I mean, I'm sure there's some kind of justification for this. I'm not saying that. It's just that every day that I get up, first off, I make a little list of things that I have to accomplish or I need to accomplish. And then I kind of look around the world, like what's going on? And I see these cartoony articles, and it just doesn't make sense. That I think that really, this pushes me more to the idea that on top of these clandestine world governance plans for the future of all mankind, there's also like billions of people with I'm going to say cabin fever is the best thing I could equate it to. So everything's been done. Everything that's allowed to be done has been done as far as technology, civilization, etc. Right? So there's no more new. And in fact, each year, all countries around the world come up with new laws to figure out things that you can't do, not things that you can do. So there's never like, Congress never meets to find out to see if you can do something new. They only meet to say, you know what? We can't have people doing this because we're not controlling the meter of that. So you can't do that. And now it's just occupying the air, being on the land. Like everywhere I look from, and I try to take a break from headlines and news and reading articles about this or that, and I'm really into reading papers that people are putting out for peer review and stuff like that. Not that I'm their peer, but I like to see what people are thinking around the world. And, the majority of it is people trying to find niches that won't be defunded with any kind of results that they might come up with for their theories or practical science. So there's just like this cap on civilization, a threshold we're not allowed to cross. And, it seems like even the owls have crossed that threshold if we're going to hunt, 500,000 owls down. And whatever happened to evolution? I thought all these scientists believed in evolution, which is, the best animal for the niche survives. And that's how it is. That's how it's always been, supposedly through the eras of different animals. So what is this weird fascination with trying to micromanage what the next evolutionary or let's say a biosphere is going to have in it? what kind of animals are allowed to live and not allowed to live. And this micromanaging is a good example of how the powers that be feel about human beings. And, I keep bringing this up, but more and more, they're setting up people to either be in this weird technocratic slave class or be a wild, human being, a feral human that doesn't fit into their metered system or their social credit score. So these will be invisible people that aren't allowed into the cities. But guess what? They're making it for nature because we got to protect nature. You can't be out in the wild either because, we're putting mongooses, we're killing owls. We're micromanaging it down to everything that's out there. So this is a bizarre time we're in. While countries are talking about, financial problems, wars to be, what the next virus is going to be or illness, they keep on and on with these kind of things. Meanwhile, the new generation.
Ransom, I would ask, what happened to the newt? Remember the newt that was also part of that thing? Like newts' lives matter.
Right. And they made a rebound because, they came back in areas all over where there was wetland. The problem with newts is they're amphibious and, they don't really like that glyphosate stuff. But they're not going to stop that. The commercial farmers, the ones that are owned by different companies and are farming on Chinese-owned land, they are not hurting the environment. So don't worry about them. They're going to keep doing that. No, I remember that. And, unfortunately, human existence, there is a truth between them. Yes, we do destroy the environment in different ways. But when you look at who are the people that actually destroy the environment, it's all of the people clamoring to stop you from living day-to-day life. It's the mega corporations. It's the governments for profit. That's who's doing it. And while they talked about carbon dioxide and all these other things, they fail to mention that they are the deforesters. They are the chemical, polluters.
Releasers.
Yeah, they are the ones that make all that. But they're busy telling you how you, the wild man, the natural living man, is bad. And now, when we talk about financial reset and things like that, how do you think it fits in that? And probably this is true for the first world, but I think this article is about the U.S. But it says 53% of millennial and Gen Z consumers are resorting to buying now, paying later services, and racking up enormous debts. Now, except for dying and leaving the planet, if there was really going to be a catastrophic shutdown of things, you wouldn't think that they would keep doing that unless, they don't care because the monetary system is going to be reset in the first place. So you got two avenues of thought here. If they keep loaning money to future generations and also taxing those generations, in other words, running the deficit as sky high as they could possibly get it, and it's all based on nothing, it's like a gamble on which generation will be that generation where they say, well, we've been letting you live good and we've been letting you borrow. So, well, it's time for you to just be happy and own nothing. So we're going to have to come and get your ancestral home or, whatever it is that you own, whatever resources you have, and liquidate those into a new form of money that will be handled by the governments. I'm sure the IRS will not disappear with any kind of new monetary system. They'll still be around. But think about this. This is obviously indications of a pop in the monetary system. If you have over half of generations that will be the main consumers, financiers, workers, etc., are already more than half in debt and haven't paid for the things that they own, what are they going to own in the future when they're still paying for the past? So this is the kind of thing that they're setting up people. And I guarantee you that 53% of the millennials and Gen Z that are consumers are not buying food products or ways to improve their home or their life with this borrowing of the money. So if you're borrowing money now, it needs to go into something, that benefits you in the future to come, and you won't mind paying that back. But that is a very high number of a bunch of debt slaves. because that's what it is. And these are the same generations of people that will be the first people to have to interact with the new monetary and biometric system. And don't kid yourself, all of these emergencies that keep happening, whether it be violence or natural disasters, what comes in its place, and we'll get to it in a minute, is a new electromagnetic system to scan everything and check everything and find out what you may or may not have. The ideas like privacy and the Fourth Amendment will soon be a thing of the past, because it's going to be so tracked and traced, and you are going to be constantly scanned, that you will never be able to do anything without, Big Brother knowing exactly what you're doing. And that includes buying and selling, eating and living, and all of the things that you kind of take for granted. But when you owe half of everything that about you, only two things can happen. You can tell the system, no, I'm not paying, in which, we kind of see those organizations running the streets, setting things on fire. So you can kind of see which direction of civilization that would go. Or you can have, decades more of people paying off things they no longer own or don't have. I don't know. It seems like a financial nightmare, but then think about adding food rationing and food costs, because if you get shrinkflation and prices of food are skyrocketing versus the money, is that not exactly the same thing as rationing, especially for those that are on assistance, which is an increasing number of the population? So think about that digital soup card that is keeping millions of families afloat. And this is just one of many socialist programs that are running, concurrent around the world. In Europe, they have all kinds of these programs, and now they are supporting numbers that far exceed the original population that it was intended to help. And it's never been a program of, a hand up. It's always been a program of a hand out, to destroy actually the family unit. And, I'm reading articles now that are saying good riddance. I think there's one on Drudge right now. Good riddance to the classic American family. We don't need that anymore. That just, what did that bring to people? Owning their home with a single income, and children that were had the choice to get educated in various places. That ain't the world you live in now. And all of those people that no longer, can find a job because they took courses or educational tracks that didn't amount to anything. Like the layman knows how to do lots of things in comparison that he could do for money, not only for himself, to make his life better, but others. So if any kind of crash happens, we know that there is an X amount of tens of millions of people that basically are lost in the world at that point. Now, they are very, conscientious people about their own education and importance, but when it comes down to hunting and gathering and producing, they are actually the useless eaters. The problem with this is those are the groups that form the governmental bodies also around the world. So we're in a conundrum, if I ever saw that. Now, you link in all of these financial changes that are happening, and I can see just 2 generations away where that, kind of threat by the elite about owning nothing and being happy will be a reality for like 95% of the world, but not the 1%, not the 0.001% that's actually the richest people in the world. They're banking. They're getting richer as we speak.
We don't need no education, just another owl in the wall. I think that was the way the song went. Oh, wait, sorry, wrong words. Maybe they'll trade owl feathers as their currency in the future. Who knows? But it's crazy that the same people you're describing are demanding the change that enslaves them into the system. They're the ones out at the protests. They're the ones with the CO2. They're the ones demanding the global carbon taxes. They're enslaving themselves through the propaganda given to them since birth through the schooling system. You see how that whole feedback loop works? It's just, it's unnerving to say the least. If you're demanding your own enslavement and people are trying to say, whoa, you're going down the wrong road, you're going to enslave yourself. And they're like, I don't care. You're an old dude. You're thinking the wrong way. I want to be my own slave. It's just insane the way they've gotten people to not only jump into Marxist ideologies, it goes far beyond that. Yeah, okay, the Marxist thing, you know, top-down control, plutocracy, whatever. But to bring that in under yourself, to have the guise of now, I had a conversation with Bob Coolidge just yesterday, or the day before. You can check that out on my YouTube channel. It's quite a good conversation about how do we both see the rest of 2024 coming out, especially with cryptocurrency, into 2025. And since you mentioned, you know, these paupers and slaves in the 1%, there's going to be more millionaires and billionaires made on this bull run for the cryptocurrency than ever any time in human history. But see, I was asking Bob, if there is a financial collapse, which everybody sees coming, do you think, or what do you think are the safest things to run to for assets? And he says something really smart to me first. He's like, don't think about the thing first. Think about the thing that you hold. A, everybody needs it, and B, that asset generates revenue for you. You can't just hold on to a piece of gold and have it sit there. Your asset you're holding needs to generate revenue for you. And I was like, okay, I get it. That's a great way to think. And then I started making a list of that. And I'm like, all right, I think I would buy gold and somehow be able to use that to leverage it. I'm not sure I could borrow against it. I'm not sure. But he was saying that, yeah, that's because you're in that demographic that knows the old stuff. You know land, you know gold, you know tools, you know whatever it is as a hard good. But he was saying, most of the, like you talk, millennials, Gen Z, they're going to run to the digital assets. To park their money in what they consider something safe is very different than what a 60, 70, 50-year-old person would deem something as safe. So now wrap this into what you're just talking about, the total control of track and trace. Because the same generation that's on the buy now, pay later is going to run to digital assets as their safe haven. But at the same time, if you're looking out at the crypto space right now, there's two bodies in our government that are fighting that actually, for me, it makes no sense. So we got the Security and Exchange Commission, which is the one that, you know, is supposed to protect those on the stock market and this and that. But then you have the Commodities Future Trading Commission, CFTC. Those are the ones that are supposed to protect you from, you know, gouging in the commodities space and make sure there's free contractual agreements inside the futures basis. This is more of like the Chicago thing. All right, so they're both overseeing different parts of the financial system in the U.S. But here's where the CFTC says Ethereum is not a commodity. But then now, just a couple days ago, the SEC said, yes, it is. We're going to take them to trial. So if you Generation Z and the millennial are going to park their thing in digital asset as a safe haven, that is about to be ripped apart. And here, I'll explain it to you as one. See, they've trapped them even further, and that's the where I'm trying to go to. If they've already didn't think they've enslaved themselves enough by demanding CO2 taxes and demanding regulation and demanding 15-minute cities and demanding track and trace and demanding chips in their hands and their skulls, this just is really the icing on the cake. Where now they're demanding that, you know, we go into crypto, but wait, we want more tracking and tracing inside the same financial system that is going to make it so difficult and so uncomfortable to own digital assets, i.e. cryptocurrencies, that you will just default back to the traditional financial system and put your money in an ETF with Bitcoin because it is going to be so difficult to own it. So the only three, now this is outside the SEC's parameters here, the only three that from this point, as we know, will not be listed as securities are Bitcoin, Litecoin, and Bitcoin Cash. Now, why would I try to, connect all this together? The younger generation goes and let's say they buy Ethereum. Well, if any of you are aware or not aware, those of you that's first time hearing about crypto airdrops, if you're holding Ethereum on a hard wallet inside your own custody, you're self-custodial with that, it's not on an exchange, you always get these airdrops coming in. Like people just send you free tokens because they have a new project that's built on the Ethereum ecosystem, and then they'll drop you like 5,000 tokens, 50 tokens, 10 tokens, whatever, and they're all of varying value right at the minute that they drop them to you of the project. But as we know in history, almost every one of those collapses down to near zero, or I mean, literally like thousandths of a cent later on. If you hold one Ethereum in a cold wallet, you're probably going to get like 10, 12 airdrops a year out of that. But the SEC is now saying that we are going to tax you on every airdrop that comes in at the price, at the time that it's dropped into your wallet. So if it's $10, like Litecoin Cash is a good example. Litecoin forked and they got Litecoin Cash, and it dropped in, and let's say max price was $40. Well, you'd be taxed at $40, but now the thing's at like, 1,000th of a cent. And they're talking about taxing that on an unrealized gain. So it drops into your wallet at say 40 bucks. They're going to tax you that even if you sold it or you still hold it. Because that runs into the same legislation right now where if you make over $100 million per year, they're going to tax you at unrealized gains on your gain on the property tax or whatever you're holding. Like that means you don't have to, even if you don't sell, you're just holding it as generational wealth. You're going to get taxed every year on that. And that's what they plan for those over 100 million. But wait a second, I thought it was only for the 100 millionaires. But wait, now you're talking about some dude on the street, some kid who got airdropped. The government wants to do the same thing. And I'm like, wait a minute, it always starts at the top. And they're scissoring everybody right now. They're scissoring those at the bottom who are young and, dropping a couple grand into digital assets. They're getting their airdrop tokens, but they're talking about unrealized gains at just a few $1,000s. But at the same time, they're trying to portray it like, oh, we're going after the billionaires. Anybody with 100 million, you can afford the extra 5%. It's only $5 on every 100. That's what they're trying to make it as. Okay, we're going to start with the billionaires, millionaire, multimillionaires. Okay, oh yeah, get the rich people. But they forgot to leave out the convenient thing of unrealized gains on airdrop tokens moving forward. So if this thing does become a security and the SEC deems it as a security, everybody who promoted it, everybody who owns it, the full thing is going to collapse, and anybody who promoted it in the past is going to be, well, let's say under some scrutiny from the FBI. This is one of the hugest stories ever in crypto coming at right now at this time when there's going to be more money made than you can possibly imagine. The GDPs of countries will be eclipsed by just the Bitcoin holdings themselves. Like you talk about getting off the system, becoming a free citizen. Holding crypto at this time will allow you the possibility to break free of all financial constraints you would ever have for the rest of your life. And these regulators and these agencies, they understand that. There's going to be more money made and more people are going to get off the farm, basically, at this time than any time in history, just because they're holding a tiny bit of crypto. Your tiny bit of crypto is going to be your retirement fund in like a year and a half. Not financial advice, but the way I'm just seeing everything written on the wall out here. And you can't have free slaves walking around, because we're talking about millions and millions and tens of millions of people that will never have to work again because they will have so much money. Now, traditionally they lock you into slaving away 9 to 5, paying your taxes, property tax, Social Security tax, and you just wait until you supposedly 65 and gonna have 69 and have margaritas on the beach. My bad. When I grew up, it was 65 to retire, but now I think they're trying to push it up to 71 to have margaritas on the beach. So put this all into perspective here. The younger generation that is taking advantage of this wealth jump that will not have to work for the rest of their lives are the very same ones they're targeting because they know they're going to jump into digital assets when times get hard. So this is the whole thing, the way the financial system's moving. The collapse will be here, and I'm sure they're going to try to reset it. And at that point, what government agencies will still be around? Because our US dollar has been reset 3 different times, if you didn't know that. If you go back into the late 1870s, we moved off the gold standard into using silver. And then in 1913, we had the formation of the Federal Reserve, which took power away from gold-backed holdings. And then in 1933, it was completely removed, gold was removed, and it was just, you couldn't own it, it was illegal. There was still a gold-backed currency-ish, but then what Nixon took us off of that into just straight fiat paper. Each one of these changes is a different currency as we know it. It went from gold to gold-backed paper to paper with just faith in the government, now to what? To a digital central bank digital currency. Like this reset has happened, although your history books might not tell you it, but we've gone through different iterations of the dollar since the 1870s. So it's going to shift again, guaranteed, man, guaranteed it is. And what are they going to do? Are they going to put you in a 15-minute city? Because there's going to be an enormous amount of people that are going to get caught out by this. And those that did not prepare are going to get put into a position where they're going to have to do anything that they are told to do in every way, shape, or form, which is just outright diabolical Black Mirror kind of episode of where the control will take it. And you can see if they have to go into camps or some kind of areas where they'll get food. You know, you just hear these stories through history of, okay, there's centralized control, but once you get off the periphery, those camps become their own fiefdoms and kingdoms. And then what happens inside? You're out in sort of the countryside areas, and then, or the more remoter areas, or like second tier, third tier cities. And then what happens? You know, like the things that are done out in these camps that will feed people or house people, there'll be quite a few abuses, I'm very sure. If you can get out of that situation and either park your money in hard assets or digital assets, government knows up to 15 or 20% of the people are smart enough to do that. The other 80% of the sheep will be in the camps. But you got 20% of the freeholds now off the slave plantation, and they're going to try to bring you back under control again. And the last thing to say here, Ransom, is now there's 44 nations on this crypto information sharing program that will go live in 2027. So did this just come out a few days ago? So if they're they're trying to give us a date on when the chasing down of those who own crypto to try to tax you on that. But then you're put into a conundrum, because if you're being taxed on unrealized gains and you have to pay the tax or go to jail, but wait, I have to sell everything to pay the tax. Even though I didn't sell it, I don't owe anything. In today's current regulation and laws on what the IRS deems as taxable income, for a better term, you actually have to sell the thing and get a gain on it before they can tax you on it. But unrealized gains mean you don't even have to sell it. They're just going to tax you because you hold it and it increased in value, so you have to pay the tax on the increase. Well, think about a kid here who bought like a tenth of a Bitcoin. The thing rocks up in huge amounts of price. And then they're like, well, you owe us 40% of that. And they're like, wait a minute, 40% of that? Okay, I have $1 million now. So I have to sell $400,000 of that Bitcoin. And they're like, yeah, well, next year you're going to have to do the same because you got the unrealized gain on that. And then 3 years later, the dude's got no Bitcoin left because he had to pay unrealized gains for 3 years in a row. And that'll wipe out the entire savings of those people. So this, adds a whole nother complexity in the Rubik's Cube. Like, how are you going to protect all that? 2027 is when all these nations are going to start sharing with the U.S. government. And it seems like it's a multinational thing. So to come back into the globalist agenda again, 44 nations sharing crypto tax information to make sure every nation taxes their citizens that hold crypto. Because slaves are getting off the farm this time. There's so much money to be made in this run up. Hundreds of millions of people will never have to work again if they even hold a small amount of. So look at the world trying to get everybody back onto the plantation again. It's absurd, it's scary, and at some point we're going to have to say no, it needs to stop. But, how do we do that in a nonviolent way? I don't know. A lot of things to think about on that. I know I dished a bunch on the plate there, but man, I'm sure you got a big spoon.
I got a big spoon. I was thinking we shouldn't even worry about none of this stuff. I mean, because they're setting a really, cool world where you just sit at your house. You don't tell you keep your opinion to yourself, and you get to, continue your commercialism if you're a good boy or a good girl and you have good credit score. And, I was thinking with the, the digital money, all of these companies will now be able to decide who their customers are. And, also they'll have all these little apps to use. So you could get your Wendy's flown to you, or your Chick-fil-A, or your orders from Walmart. And you know what? You won't even need to go to a store, because all stores are going to be is, that place that might have a flash mob, but it's a centralized distribution location for food items, but you have to call ahead and use the app and have the right thing going on. That's obviously where it's going. I mean, they're going to be able to tell the individual no because you don't participate, or at least that's what they're trying to set up going forward. Here's another article. I remember I told you last week, I forgot which franchise it was, but more and more of them are going to this idea of you just not coming to our store. We'll show you on the internet what we have to offer you, and we'll fly it to you. So you don't call us, we'll call you. Everything from stuff you need at your house that you might be able to get through the internet, and you got to keep in mind, if they decide you don't need it, they just unlist the item. You remember when you went to the grocery store and they told you, hey, those seeds for growing food, those are luxury items. You don't need that. That's non-essential. Don't worry about that. You don't need that. But you can come in here and buy our irradiated food and, the seeds that won't grow you nothing. But anyway, back to the technological nightmare we're going. So supposedly Walmart, Chick-fil-A, and even 7-Eleven are rolling out new technologies that aim to deliver items to customers in a matter of minutes. The 3 mega brands, and keep this in mind. So this will help with the 15-minute city. You don't have to go across town and check prices or none of that. They'll tell you what's cheap and what's on sale, and they'll deliver that right to you. 3 mega brands, first companies. And then back to, all of this. How does this fit into the crazy idea of shutting down our supply chain? Do you think this is, worse or not as bad as the pandemic view that we had there for a couple of years that supposedly, shorted us on toilet paper and food and all kinds of stuff? What do you think is going to happen when the overall effect of all of these industrial complex things go burn, or whatever's happening to them, they blow up, they burn up? It just so happens that this bridge being in the water is going to stop all of the coal from coming out of that area. So that might affect energy prices, and they can't get their goods back and forth now. So I wonder how much this is going to be milked like the last event, and how many more of these are going to happen. And then you have to ask yourself, if you watch that video, when you saw it rolling in and then the power go out and then it turn and, the power comes back on and then it turns a little bit more and then the power goes off and then boom, right into the main support. Now, a lot of people are just saying it's just a big industrial accident, another mysterious continued industrial accident that somehow might affect where we're going as far as prices, from everything from gas to food to little gadgets, gizmos, supplies to fix things and run things. How many more of these are going to happen? I mean, we've had the beef industry, had problems with fires, and then we got the chicken plants that have fire, and then, all the vegetables got Ebola. I mean, it just goes on and on and on. Reasons why, they're just going to have a hard time. So when does this all coalesce into an actual emergency? And do you think, in your opinion, David, do you think this was just dirty fuel that caused a problem, or was it hacked, or did they just drive it right into it on purpose, on behalf of someone? But you got to keep in mind, this same boat has crashed before and ran into a whole pier and stuff. I don't know if it was the same crew or what's going on there. But it does seem suspicious that so much of the food industry and the supply chain industry has been having really bad luck for the last several years. I mean, it's really bizarre, don't you think?
I do. And how does that dovetail in with the closure of Oregon farms? Because if you have a cow, or if you have chickens or rabbits or goats, and you have a concrete pad where you might milk them, or you have a gravel basin where you might keep them clean while you're shearing them, that's considered a contained feedlot, and you have to put $100,000 worth of infrastructure in, or they will close your very small farm with 1 or 2 cows, or like 10 goats or 10 sheep, and then you're now on the government's watch list because you're operating a contained feedlot under Oregon law now with the changes. But how does the dirty fuel match with that? Well, maybe it's a ploy also. It's just an excuse to say, because now they would have fuel regulations where tankers aren't allowed to come into the U.S. unless there's a certain fuel grade with it. Well, if you're going to have to change over that infrastructure for a lot of smaller shipping firms, that will bankrupt them. They can't, like the small farmer in Oregon. And if you've been following the story, Charlie Rankin over there at Yanasama Ranch in North Carolina, he raises bison. I know the guy. He was putting out some information about the new Oregon laws are targeting small farms to shut down all small farming. Anything with animals on it, Oregon wants gone. And the way they're doing it is a very snide and sneaky way. And they're saying this very cleanly. If you have a concrete poured pad anywhere on your property or gravel, and gravel driveway wouldn't be included in the gravel pad, and you have animals, they're not even equating it, okay, those animals are on your gravel pad. It's just you have those two elements on your property. Now you're considered a feedlot operator because there's an area for animals to walk onto, and they consider that if it's a non-natural grass or non-dirt substrate that the animals were to walk on, that would be considered a feedlot operation. So even at, like I say, 3 or 4 goats, they're using satellites to see who has animals and who has what kind. If you have a poured concrete block, it could have been from the last owner and you never even use it. But if it's near your chicken pen, or if it's you put your chickens on that thing because it's not muddy, when it rains, easier to clean, then that's considered a feedlot. Now you have to do at least $100,000 of infrastructure upgrade on that because of the rain runoff. So Oregon's trying to say, well, you're a contained feedlot and all the runoff in there is going to drop into the waterways. And you're, oh, wait, dude, I got 50 acres on a farm and I got like 3 or 4 goats in the middle of my farm. It's not going to matter. It's on my property. That's just it's never going to run off. But it doesn't matter for them under the law. You have a concrete pad. You got some goats. You're now and they're coming after people, giving them these letters of cease and desist or upgrade the infrastructure. And they have this whole list of parameters of things like you got to contain this, then you need to dispose of it, and you got to build all this extra water catchment facilities around and encapsulate your thing. It's really quite very, very, very expensive. Like no small farmers can afford it. And it would do no good anyway. And this includes, here's the list. It includes rabbits. So if you have rabbit hutches and you're raising rabbits and you got like 20 rabbits out back, and obviously you're going to want to put them on concrete, and you're going to want to fence them in because of predators, that's a feedlot. And you have to stop your rabbit production. Chickens, anything's chickens, ducks, goats, chickens, ducks, turkeys, geese, anything along that way. If you have that and there's an area for them to get onto and it's concrete and you have an area for them to be housed, you have to stop. You have to give up all your chickens, all your geese, all your ducks. If you have goats, same thing. If you got sheep, same thing. You know, like I don't want to be shearing sheep. I had some sheep before. You definitely don't want to be shearing sheep out in the grass in a wet field somewhere. That's just like, why would you do that? Even like as a homeowner or just a regular guy with 3 sheep, if I would bring them in and we would do something with them because we had to clip their hooves occasionally because, you know, you get the overgrowth on their hooves, definitely have to trim that off because they start limping and everything. If I was to do any maintenance on the animal on that concrete pad, that is now considered me being a feedlot because they're on that concrete pad. Well, of course they're on a concrete pad. I don't want to be working on them in a muddy field. They're coming in, we wash them off, we can definitely see what it needs to do. We can spray some blue coat on it after we trim off the hooves. There's no way I'm going to be working out in a muddy field. Common sense says that. But now the new law in Oregon says, well, you need to convert all this because you're using a sheep on your pad. I'm like, whoa, whoa, whoa. All right, so this is the way that they're really trying to put every single small farmer out of business in Oregon. And they're soon coming for the gardens too. Next year, they're going to have the same thing with a certain amount of square feet with your nitrogen runoff. They're following the same MO that they did in the Netherlands, but in Oregon. So get ready for it. They're going for the animals right now. They're coming for the actual gardens next year. It's on the books. So again, it comes right back into all these shippers. You know, they've been trying to shut down the supply chains forever, and they really are very trying to fast track us getting cut off from all our goods. Now think about the opportunity presented here. They're saying dirty fuel. I don't know one way or the other. All I do know, one thing, ships burn the dirtiest fuel in the world. If they could burn a tire, they would throw it in there. I know there's some facilities in Asia that chip tires up and make them into real small, you know, flakes that they add into their fuels that then substitute and can burn at some proportion. And I'm not sure what the actual mix is of regular bunker fuels with the chip tire, but they do actually burn that. They burn the dirtiest fuels in the world. Now, some of the stuff I'm hearing about in Asia that I've heard about for years, decades over here, how dirty this stuff is. They take chemicals, used motor oils, anything. The ships will burn pretty much anything. So to hear about a dirty fuel thing, I'm like, wait, well, it doesn't make sense for me, just from what I understand from the shipping industry in Asia, having lived out here for many a year, and hearing the stories, because I was involved with some procurement back in the day, and going out to the port facilities, and visiting a lot of stuff in Myanmar and China, and it's incredible what those ships can burn. I mean, the toxic waste stuff, they're just getting rid of it over the ocean, man, burn it. So for them to come and say dirty fuel, okay, I get it. But now what's the next thing with the dirty fuel? Oh, we need regulation. So any ship coming into an American port can no longer have this type of dirty fuel in it. This kind of bunker fuel will be outlawed if you're coming into America. I think they did with like New Zealand. There could be no nuclear powered aircraft carriers coming in New Zealand ports. That was back in the day. Now that's changed. Back in the day, you couldn't, so all those ships stayed out. It's the same thing. Like if you're going to run into an American port, you're going to have to completely retool your vessel. And then they're going to have monitoring, and you're probably going to have to pay for testing, and it's not going to be free. The government's not going to hop on your boat and test your fuel for free. Are you kidding me? So think about how many firms they can bankrupt by making them adhere to new fuel standard laws on larger vessels or medium carriers, break bulk, whatever, doesn't really matter. But if they could do that maneuver alone, they could probably stop, I would say conservatively, 10 to maybe 15% of all shipping inbound into the United States would no longer come in, just because it would be so expensive for them to retrofit the ships. So if you want to cut off our supply chains further, dirty fuel is an awesome way to do it. That'd be perfect. You already remove competition out of cost. They'll do it themselves. You don't have to remove them with our Navy out of the ports. You just make it so prohibitive for them to come in that they will self-regulate themselves from coming to America. And that is the whole thing too about the farmers. It got so prohibitive there that the World Economic Forum made it so difficult for the farmers that they decided to strike and not grow food themselves and boycott the food and block the highways and stop the food shipments themselves. World Economic Forum didn't have to pull the puppet strings and make the governments with their armies go in and close down the supermarkets. They just made it so difficult for the farmers and so ridiculous to do business that the farmers did it themselves. Which, by the way, on the last point here, Ransom, I know I'm rambling, but with all the farmer strikes going on, I was talking to Marjorie Wildcraft. We did an interview the other day, and she was talking about backyard meat production, and she and I, were talking about Charlie's articles and whatnot. But the point I brought up along with her was we both understand these European farmer strikes. So Ukraine's only going to be at about 5, maybe maximum 10% of total production. So they're looking at about 3 million tons this year or less coming out, when they used to produce 30 million tons. They're going to be about 3 million tons or under. So that's going to be a significant cut of world grain supplies for less developed nations, like Africa was their main market. But are the farmers that are in striking right now across the entire Eurozone, are they going to plant this year at 100% of their normal planting rate? Or will that be a substantial reduction, 80%, 50%? How about they don't plant at all? We'll teach you a lesson, government. When in actuality, the World Economic Forum is completing their goals of having the food supply stop globally by having the farmers and citizens do it to themselves. It's no different than these millennials and Gen Z that are absolutely demanding changes that enslave them. They're demanding carbon taxes. They're doing it to themselves. The dirty fuel, they're doing it to themselves. It's just, when you look at it from a little bit wider view, you're like, whoa, this is getting kind of nefarious in itself to pit humanity against humanity. They're pitting human against human. And the way it's going to roll out, I can't see how this can go much further unless our society breaks in half here somewhere.
You gave me an epitome or a really good idea. I don't know if it's a good idea. It's a good thing we don't work for government.
Dude, I remember that word.
Yeah, there we go. I don't know what I was saying. Epiphany, right? think about everything that you were saying about the Oregon farmers, about having chickens, roosters, rabbits, the possibility of maybe hiding a little bit of livestock off in your land somewhere. And that being in Oregon, that just happens to be the spotted owl's habitat area. So now you got possibly people coming into areas that you might have concrete on and rabbits and all of these things that attract owls at nighttime. So you'll have armed government snipers around private properties in the middle of the night, just, accidentally coming across maybe a little bit of excess animals that you have, or maybe some, illegal feedlots that you may have hidden on the land. But that's okay because, those are all tempting for those other kind of owls to come in and eat, and they might mess up the spotted owl's habitat there. But really think about the connection there of the things that they come up with. We're going to put a task force to go kill 500,000 owls, and in order to do that, we need to traipse across millions of acres of habitat that they might live in, which might also be, areas where people are farming, ranching, and grooming animals to eat. I don't know. Is that too woo-woo to think, hey, they just so happen to make a way to put armed soldiers out there in the wilderness everywhere, to protect the environment, of course. I don't know. Is that too woo-woo for you? Or, if one organization of the government happen to tell the other organization in the government that you might have, illegal scenarios with your animals, your rabbits, your chickens and whatnot, and their poop and their runoff. I don't know. I was just thinking, because, you went off on that dirty fuel thing, and that is the kind of things that they think up to do. It had dirty fuel, so we're going to have to regulate who comes in. So I hope that you guys are okay with paying a little bit more for your goods and services. We might even have to have a ship out in the ocean transport those things over to one of our ships for a small fee to get it into the harbor, because we don't want to, risk anything with those foreign ships and their bad fuel. I mean, they could just take every scenario, any direction, and enforce these, irrelevant government actions on things because they have an agenda to stop or, make money on a certain thing or not allow someone else to. I mean, think about just that idea. And I was showing everybody the articles where they're talking about, you might have to not have coal and other things like that, just because this one bridge was taken out. And then there's this here from the New York Post. They're worried about, death for their livelihoods after the Key Bridge collapse. And then you have investigators probing that dirty fuel. And then, like you said, no telling what can come from that. But there's all of these other things, like they're talking about the lasting impact. You got to look at the words that they use to describe these things. So they're already foreshadowing all kinds of economic problems that they can tie to this bridge event. And, I don't know, is it too far-fetched to think that government would send out armed people that are under the guise of hunting nocturnal owls all over an environment and a habitat, which is also being heavily regulated against growing and cultivating food? Is that too woo-woo? Is that too out there?
No, because if I saw dudes in my night scope traipsing across my land that were armed, they would get my nocturnal emission. A little bit of extra fertilizer, not a problem. But when you got armed dudes traipsing through at night that are unannounced, didn't announce that they would be in the area on private property, at that point, then what? Because for me, that's a direct threat against me. I mean, absolutely. If you're looking in terms of like threat assessment, okay, somebody's driving up the driveway, you're unfamiliar with the car, they came through the gate, it's posted no trespassing, private property. Okay, that's its own threat assessment at a certain distance. It might be, daylight out, you maybe got the two dogs out in the front field or whatever. Okay, so you're a little bit more secure. But when your dogs are starting to go off at night and there's 2, 3, 4 dudes traipsing around that you can actually clearly see in your night scope that are armed also, that is a completely different threat assessment. So those are, and levels of intensity, that ramps it up like a 10x. And then really, what's your response going to be? Because for me, first thing I would do is, have somebody call the sheriff immediately. because being on the land unannounced like that, where there's signs everywhere, I would think poachers for sure, because in Tennessee we have a problem with with the ginseng bandits, where they go around at night. They use blue lights on their helmets when they're looking for ginseng, and they come up and they run through people's property, and they know exactly where it grows. They just come in at night and steal everybody's ginseng that's growing all over the land, and they just start at one end of the mountain and just move on through. Now, sometimes these guys get caught by dogs or people out there hunting also, or just somebody up working on the forest that's sitting there silently or whatever when they come through. But most of those guys are armed up, and a lot of times when the sheriff comes and gets them, the only reason that they doesn't.
This is the story of the worst road trip ever. In April of 1846, a man named James Fraser Reed, an Illinois businessman, eager to build a greater fortune in the rich land of California, leads 9 covered wagons out of Springfield, Illinois, on the 2,500-mile journey to California, in what would become one of the greatest tragedies in the history of westward migration. Reed found others seeking to find fortune, adventure, and new beginnings on this perilous trek across the West. Among them was the Donner family. Others like the Graves, Breens, Murphys, Eddies, McCutcheons, Kesebergs, and the Wolfingers would come too. The successful Reed was determined his family would not suffer on the long journey, as his wagon was an extravagant 2-story with a built-in iron stove, spring-cushioned seats, and bunks for sleeping, and 2 hired servants to help with the workload. Reed's 12-year-old Virginia dubbed it the Pioneer Palace Car. Also in the group were the families of George and Jacob Donner. George Donner was a successful 62-year-old farmer who had migrated 5 times before settling in Springfield, Illinois, along with his brother Jacob. Obviously adventurous, the brothers decided to make one last trip to California. At the bottom of Jacob Donner's saddlebag was a copy of Lansford Hastings's Emigrant's Guide, with its tantalizing talk of a faster route to the Garden of the Earth. It's tough, but the going's good. Tamsin Donner writes in her journal, "I could never have believed we could have traveled so far with so little difficulty. Indeed, if we do not experience anything worse, I shall say the trouble is all in getting started, but as leader of the wagon train, Tamsin's husband George Donner is aware there's one final obstacle to their journey, the Sierra Nevada, with peaks up to 14,000 feet. It's known if you fail to clear the mountain passes before the first snow falls, the repercussions and results can be both horrifying and deadly. As the Donner party approaches Utah, George Donner makes a pivotal flaw in his decision to splinter off from the main party. Hastings Cutoff says it's a fine level road with plenty of water and grass, saving 400 miles. As it turns out, Donner's information is wrong. In fact, the so-called shortcut adds at least 100 miles to the journey. High in the Sierra Nevada, the Donner party enters the Truckee Pass. They're only 30 miles from the California plains, but supplies are dangerously low, and traveling through the mountains is taking its toll, ending in a broken axle. The Donner party stops to make repairs, but that night, 5 feet of snow falls. Soon the drifts are 60 feet deep. The Donner party will be stranded for 5 months. In just 3 weeks, they've eaten all their food. Then they kill their pack animals. Next, they eat charred bones, twigs, bark, leaves, and dirt. Finally, a suggestion was made that were one to die, the rest might live. Cannibalism. On Christmas Day, 1846, a Christmas feast like few others takes place. They devour their first human. Bodies are cut up, flesh labeled so people don't eat their own kin. Later, 4 rescue parties bring out some survivors. The very last finds a man named Ludwig alone. Around him, a scene that haunts us today and will continue to leave a lasting mark in history. Ludwig is surrounded by bones and entrails, a 2-gallon kettle filled to the brim with human blood. Also nearby is George Donner's body, his skull split open, his brain removed. Tamsin Donner's body is never found. It also seems a man named William Foster shot 2 Miwok Native American guides named Lewis and Salvador for food, which is the only instance of anyone in the Donner-Reed party that was murdered and eaten. The rest of the cannibalized were already dead. They took the survivors to Sutter's Fort, California, by the route that is now known as Donner Pass. Stranded in the early snows of the Sierra Nevada mountains, nearly half the travelers died of starvation and illness. Even today, Interstate 80 has to be closed occasionally due to heavy snows and blizzards. Only 45 of the original 81 members of the Donner Party survived. This truly was the worst road trip ever, which reminds us not to be complacent but instead be proactive with our prepping. We don't have to worry about not having food to last. We have My Patriot Supply. And right now, you can save $200 on a 3-month food kit with Adapt 2030. Adapt and stay prepared.
Because the boa constrictor's ever taken another twist to tighten in this last couple of weeks or months, and I'm wondering when the truth eventually starts to come out about this Baltimore accident, when we will no longer be allowed to talk about it. You know, there's many things that are there that's free to talk about in the beginning, and then suddenly, as the truth starts to make its way out, then suddenly it's a verboten subject. And we see this almost every time. It's the same MO, always. So Revolution Radio, again, thank you for letting us broadcast our free thoughts here. And anybody who likes this, and this will be one of the last stations on air that is allowed to have free speech, so please support as we go through, and listen to the other guests also, as they have so many ideas that dovetail right into what Ransom and I are talking about. Because as I sit here this morning, looking off the balcony with birds flying by, I'm just amazed that they would go to the lengths of killing millions of owls to kill one owl to protect another owl. That sounds very familiar with the culture wars that are happening right now. Kill off one thought of mind frame or one ideal set and then replace it with another. Are we killing off spotted owls for whatever barn owls, or are we killing off what you consider free markets for communist top-down approach plutocracy markets? I mean, as we look across the world of just your newspaper every day or your news feed, if you decide to partake in such propaganda, you see that it's no different. It's one species replaced for another species. Now you got to think about your mind. It's a species. It's inhabiting your mind space. So they're just trying to replace mind space with another mind space. And you know, before we went on the break, we were talking about these new law changes in Oregon that are going to deem small farmers illegal. If you have small amounts of chickens, rabbits, goats, even if you have like 2 or 3 cows, they're coming for you to shut that down. Now, gardens, as I was saying before, gardens are on the agenda for next year. They've already started talking about the garden legislation, and you knew it was going to happen. You knew they were going to come for the gardens. Legislation next year talks about nitrogen runoff on gardens. So you're only going to have a certain size garden before they are going to require you to have a permit. And then also, I'm sure the same thing. You're going to have to put a bunch of environmental like barrier safeguards in there, and who knows how much that would cost you. Because currently, if you have a few small animals and you've been deemed as a contained feedlot because you have a concrete slab on your property, you have a gravel area where you bring your animals onto to wash them or care for them, $100,000 minimum to upgrade to meet the environmental standards. And I'm wondering what it would be for a half-acre garden. You know, at what point would they come in and just start digging it up? Because at the point that anybody comes on my land and starts digging my garden up, at that point, that's the same as them pulling me out of my house. You know, that at that point it stops. So you're going to have to make a lot of hard decisions instantly on what is going to happen, because it's going to take enough people to continually say no. Whether you go grab them and tie them up and call the sheriff and wait for them to come back, or, you know, if they're coming in to disable, obviously they're going to have machinery there. So how do you disable their machinery in enough time and then call the sheriff or get some neighbors to come by and be like, you're not doing this here, bro. Not in this neighborhood, not in this community. Get out. You know, and again, the sheriff, you got to understand, you know, what's your sheriff? Are they on the side of you, or are they on the side of the corporations? Because it seems like there's a lot of small towns that have been overrun and overtaken by this Marxist agenda, that the leaders in these small towns, when the city councils and the sheriff's office, are also extremely Marxist ideology leaning. That doing away with private property rights, doing away with any type of private ownership rights. Just even you guaranteed under our documents from the founding fathers of what you are, inalienable rights given to you by the Creator are no longer, acknowledged in small towns even across America. So, what I say, you have to know your own sheriffs. That's why I encourage you to talk to the sheriffs during the election time, or even just stop in and just say, hey, I live here and I wanted to just talk to the sheriff for a minute and see what he's all about or she's all about. I want to find out. As long as you're not high or you're not drunk when you go in there, they'll take that as, all right, this is a solid character in the community, and then talk to them for a minute. So next time you have a need for them, then they will remember you as a clean, normal person. We've been taught to fear a lot of these authorities. The regular police, yeah, they can be a little corrupt here and there, but the people you really want to know around your county are going to be the sheriffs, because they have the ultimate authority, even over federal law enforcement. So the sheriffs have the highest position in the county. So if these types of laws or legislation, or those who are going to enforce this legislation are trying to come into these counties, obviously Oregon's a different story. That's a completely controlled state. That is hostile lands, overtaken. I could say almost occupied territory at this point. Because if you're going to try to look and see it, I would call it occupied territory. So it's no different of an invasion. So there's some areas, the invasion lines. I mean, if you go into Ukraine, where's the occupied territory? If you're going over into anywhere on the planet, where's occupied territory? I just saw a bunch of new stuff kicking off in the Sudan as well. Oh, by the way, in the Sudan, they're selling acreage to foreigners now, so you can buy acres of land in Sudan. Starting price, $10 an acre. Or was it hectares? I'd have to look back at the article. Remember, it was 10 per one. I think it was acres or hectares. But anyway, Sudan's starting to open up for private land ownership by foreigners. I wonder how long that'll last, and could you even protect it after you buy it? Got private armies running around all over the place there. Occupied territory. So we're looking at occupied territories in the United States, such as California and Oregon. I'll leave it there. But anyway, Ransom, welcome back for the second hour here. I know I babbled getting into the thoughts, but you were trying to get on a track of thought there before we went on the break, so please continue. Are you on mute by chance? Or is Ransom gone? There you are.
No, I'm here. No, I was laughing at the silliness of killing these owls. Who knows that, where they were at, they weren't endangered and about to go extinct there, and they just naturally moved to a new spot so they wouldn't disappear. Or maybe they just want to clear the airwaves so you could get your deliveries from Walmart, Chick-fil-A, Amazon, and 7-Eleven. We can't have all those pesky owls up there in the sky doing their thing. The whole lineup now is kind of set up for them to just get you used to being dead. The same. You were talking about the Oregon thing, and it's exactly the same thing over in the UK. Here's an article talking about insulting UK Telegraph. Welsh farmers who fear eco land grab, they're supposed to lose up to 20% of their holdings to trees and wildlife. How about that? And they themselves fear extinctions. Or how about this one? This is a website that teaches kids when it's time to die when they hit their carbon limit. ABC website tells kids when they should die. Hey, you're bad, and you produce carbon. So if you get to this point, you might just have to take one of the routes that are being offered by various governments around the world. And when we're talking about stuff that's going on in Europe, they're talking about, they're edging closer to war after 48 chaotic hours that 2 new people are going to join. They're trying to scare everybody. Meanwhile, there's a complete reorganization of all the governments and things like that in the background, and they laugh at people. Like here's this Microsoft article here from the Insider: farewell and good riddance to the typical American family. And they go on to tell us how, basically, if you're somebody from one of those traditional families, or you're trying to have a nuclear family, that, you're bad for the environment, you're bad for society, and maybe you should just not have children, and you should be a good citizen and not consume anything, and just stop expanding your carbon limit. Meanwhile, in Haiti, they're saying that situation's cataclysmic. And over in Gaza, don't worry about it. We're going to send peacekeepers to keep the peace that has never been there. And now we have governments messing with Musk too, because he gives internet to all the wrong people. We don't want to give internet to just everybody. But back to this war on small farmers. Kind of my point is that I've been looking at all of these new programs that are basically in the line of rewilding, and all of them have to do with the excuses that are going to be put forth through these organizations like the BLM or other, like you have the, what is the other organization here? Oh, and it's the World Economic Forum that's also pushing this in Oregon, so don't forget that. But they want to restrict land for wildlife, and that's the land that you live on. That's the thing that people are missing. So you have a whole group of lefties, and I'm just going to call them lefties because they just don't have a clue. They think that all those farmers out there are just a bunch of, those nuclear family racist ignoramuses that with no education and fly over country, and we can make fun of them, their people, but they forget that this is the origin of everything that sustains them and civilization. So when these groups start to disappear, it will be like in archaeology when you see a certain group disappear due to a new group moving in and living better. So you could equate it to when you had all of the first hunter-gatherers, the Iberian Peninsula people and the original Britons living there, living out their lives, hunter-gathering, they're living alongside with Neanderthal. And then all of a sudden, this new group of people shows up and they're farming. They're growing their food. They have domesticated animals, all this stuff, and their genes just disappear. This is the exact same thing, but in reverse. So instead of a new group of people moving in, the governments of the world are trying to clear land of people using it or living on it or being, a feral human on it. And to do that, they have to get rid of this idea of private property and the way that individual family or person could run their own land and decide what they're going to do on it. You can't do that because you're tied to the 8 billion other people and the planet. So that is an absolute Marxist idea right there, but they're hiding it as an environmental one, and they're doing it everywhere in the Western world. 20% of the land they got to give up. Guess what happens when they give up 20% of their land for trees and wildlife? Well, the government will come along in 2 years and say that's not enough. Meanwhile, teaching the kids that, you should only be able to have so much land and so much food, and you should only be able to eat so much food there, or you're hurting the planet and you should die. You should die when you hit your carbon limit. And who's deciding this carbon limit? And isn't that exactly what they're doing to us right now, is pushing the carbon limit in the direction of extinction? Because, I dabble a little bit and stuff, and I'm realizing that carbon dioxide has been a whole lot more, and the planet has been way hotter and way colder than it is now. And we are living on just the cusp of extinction as far as that goes when you're talking about the level of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. If it goes much lower, you're not going to be able to grow anything. Matter of fact, you'll probably be having trouble farming at all. And is that what they're really planning behind the scenes, is literally trying to strangle out mankind to a point where they're forced to take their products. There won't be any farmers out there. And then, let's slip in lab-grown meat, because we don't want to have people growing meat. We'll just clone the meat in giant facilities, and we'll sneak it in first to your pets because people are rejecting this idea. But, if your pets are eating it, and then maybe we could slip a little bit into the chicken nuggets and the fish sticks and anything else that comes in one of those pink slime or mush type things that they make a product out of. Why not? I mean, you're helping the planet. And, back to this Baltimore thing, the U.S. is second largest coal exporting port. So what do you think that's going to do for energy at the same time as you have administrations, not only in the world, but of your own nation, trying to shut down energy production, shut down food production, shut down individual rights? And the reason that they want those rights so bad is so you can't complain and you can't redress your government. And you're going to see a lot more of this restriction of speech. So that's the new thing, is anytime you point out a flaw or something like that. And they started it with the climate cult, where they tried to start saying that people are deniers. And they borrowed that from World War II, of course, to get those emotional strings attached to it. And now they'll call you a denier. And if that doesn't work, you're a racist or some other thing that they can label you as to dehumanize you. So therefore, your opinion doesn't matter. And we'll go one step further by saying that you can't even talk. You can't even have exposure. And a lot of people are relying on, these oligarchs, I guess you call them, or billionaires, whatever you want to call them. People like Elon Musk that seem to be the knight in shining armor. And he comes to you buys a platform, and he makes it kind of more, leaning towards free speech. But then when you take a look at what's really going on, the guy's claiming it's freedom of reach. No. You can't, everybody can't see you. If we don't like what you're saying, you'll just be put in timeout. It's freedom of speech, not freedom of reach. We'll continue to censor and ban people just like we did before, but we'll say we're for free speech. And at the same time, we'll say we're worried about AI, but put this chip in your head and use our AI. So it's obvious that this is going on, that they give you these kind of heroes that are really not heroes. I mean, think about Elon Musk. For example, he is in bed with the government all the way, completely. Do you really think that if the government has some kind of agenda that he tied into it with all of his billions, are going to say, you know what, I don't want to do that? Of course he's not. He's going to go along with it. So he's just put there as the choice to make you think that, things might be changing the other way. But in the background, they are shutting down all of that. That's going away. That's something that has to go bye-bye for the new system. You can't have people pointing out things. You can't have, the guy on the street showing you what really happened on the street. And that way they can call anyone and everyone a conspiracy theorist, an insurgent, a denier, all of these words, so that you can't defend yourself when you point out, hey, the government is being tyrannical. They're trying to take away our own production of food so that we're forced to take whatever deal that they're going to offer. It's kind of like if you remember that scene in the Star Wars, I think it was Return of the Jedi, when they're doing a deal with Darth Vader, and he makes the deal worse, and the guy complains and he says, hey, don't make me negotiate again, or something like that. That's what they're doing to us right now. And where does it go? It doesn't go anywhere good, obviously. They're shutting down everything. So what does that mean for the individual? It means that you have to be a renegade. You're going to have to grow your own food anyway. You're going to have to ranch your own food anyway. And communities are going to have to come together, like you said, and start saying no. Start saying no to the groups of people that show up. And if enough people do that, they will back down. They have no choice. So they have to resort to the destabilizing campaign and the mind control campaign through the media, where they tell you whichever agenda that you're supposed to feel this way or that way about. And as long as they got the majority of people being couch potato TV heads, because they have no idea where the potato comes from. They don't know where their Big Mac is made. They don't know where any of that comes from. They have no idea, but they know that on TV they said that those people are bad. They're probably racist, and they're killing the planet because of their cow farts.
Hey, leave my cows alone. Another thing you didn't allude to here with the coal shipment stopping, also the military, 4 of its largest transport vessels are stuck back there too, which means like tanks, Humvees. These could transport a huge, it's the largest ones that we have in the Navy to transport that type of heavy equipment. 4 of those are locked behind the bridge. So I don't know how they're going to be able to deliver by air such a large amount of cargo, because I remember 3,000 tanks were slated to head over to Israel. 3,000 tanks. That's the kind of money and arms they were giving to Israel. I guess they must be losing a lot of tanks if they had to order 3,000 of them. But that doesn't go by air. That goes by those particular amphibious ships. That's why they were building the new port over there in Gaza, to allow those ships to unload the tanks right there on shore. Now, those are stuck behind the bridge, so don't know what's going to happen with that. But another thing that's stuck behind there, if you didn't know, that Baltimore port is one of the largest export areas for automobiles manufactured in the United States. Now, you might think, okay, well, it's Ford and GM and whatever, they can't sell their cars overseas. That's not exactly true, because Mitsubishi and Japan, and there's a few other nations, Korea, manufacture an enormous amount of automobiles in the United States that are then sent either back to their home markets or overseas. So if you think about it for a second, they were rejecting electric vehicles left, right, and center. Nobody wanted EVs. Nobody still wants them. What happens now if there's a blockage of the port for 9 months and no automobiles are going out, and just magically these countries run out of cars, of new car sales, and you go to buy one and like, you know what, we can't get anything from America for we don't know how much longer. You got an electric vehicle, an electric vehicle, or an electric vehicle. You got no other choice. Do you want to get one, or do you want to wait for another year to get a new car? Oh wait, am I just something crushed, the building fell on it, whatever. I don't have a car anymore, so I have to go get a new one. You want an electric vehicle, or an electric vehicle? Okay, I'll take the electric vehicle. This is another ploy that seems to be it's just opportunistic. I'm not saying it happened because of this, but I'm just saying it's an opportunistic play on the part of the electric vehicle manufacturers. Now, yeah, they can send some stuff out of Long Beach, but you got to truck it across the states. The auto industry is set up in a certain supply chain fashion where those trains are running up to certain ports, or those, you see those open bed vehicle carriers that are destined for a certain location. The automobile would be affected, automobile industry would be affected also. So another blowback, talking about the union workers just at the docks themselves. And you said long-lasting impact or long-lasting repercussions. This thing is not going to be, they're trying to sell you the price tag at 30 billion or 40 billion. This thing is going to be upwards of close to $1 trillion by the time it's all said and done. Hey, the salvage needs to come. And they were looking at 30 billion just for the salvage. The reinsurers are going to get ripped apart. And this is the thing I talked about on a video the other day. The banking system used to have an emergency amount of money from the Federal Reserve. So if a bank was going to collapse and then start a bank run or something, our U.S. government would step in and say, all right, well, here's some money so you don't collapse and you don't scare everybody and the rest of the system. Well, just on March 11th, there's no more emergency funding for any banks in America because the people demanded it so, because we were giving it like, yeah, blah, blah, whatever. Their excuse was that they listened to the people, and the people were so angry that the government kept giving free money to banks to bail them out that they listened to the citizens this time and they stopped this. So right now, March 11th, there's no more bailouts for the banks. So any bank that goes down from now will just go down and take everybody's savings with it and have to bail everybody. And oh, imagine that, the theft of everybody's money. Gee. The reason I say that is insurance companies are intertwined with banks, because sometimes insurance companies own the banks because it's underwriter for loans, then the insurance company's on top of that. So you can see these are like DNA strands moving, always have been, definitely since the 1950s. So the reinsurers that are going to have to start plunking out tens of billions, hundreds of billions of dollars, how are they going to be affected? Well, they're going to go bankrupt. Now, will the U.S. government bail them out? I don't know. It's an unknown. Really, nobody knows. A lot of people are asking the question because if the banks are holding the insurance companies, because it's vice versa. Sometimes the insurance company owns the banks, and sometimes the bank will own an insurance company. So if the bank is going to fail because the insurance company losses, the March 11th law will not allow them to get any new funding to stop the collapse. But if it's an insurance company that owns a bank, that's a different story. It's a gray area. Nobody knows what will happen. But the amount of money to rebuild this bridge is going to exceed into the tens of billions of dollars. And then the lost wages and the knock-on effects for industry, and then just like these really quickly affecting things here of not enough fertilizer coming in for the planting or for the mid-season. Here in America, how will that dent our crop yields? You know, and then what are the food price increases and the inflation on food for the American and world populace? I mean, there's all these other knock-on effects that, like I say, it's going to come into the trillions. It's not going to be hundreds of billions of dollars. When you finally trace out all the effects of this, you're going to look into an enormous amount of setbacks. Like what happens when these dock workers, I'll use dock workers as an example. What if they cannot pay their mortgages because they lost their jobs, and then the banks suddenly are sitting on underwater properties, and then, you know, well, how does this whole thing work out in the wash as well? They're going to need more government assistance because they don't have their jobs. You know, that's how much extra money. So when you look at it, if you're looking at just at the direct costs, the government wants to obfuscate and just like, hey, don't look right at all the costs. Just look at the bridge. Okay, the bridge is going to be $30 billion to rebuild it. We need, you know, extra money. We need to salvage that thing. We need to get the boat out of there, and we need to get the bridge rebuilt. The contractor going to probably get some slush fund thing. Mayor of Build Back Better over there. So it's going to cost a lot more money. They're probably going to be behind. Nothing in the government ever works when it's contracted. It's always running double budget and sort of thing. So you can already look at 100 billion just on the bridge rebuild. You might even laugh at that and say, 30 billion, dude, how can it be 100? Well, apparently you never worked with government contracts. None of them come in on time, barely ever, and they're always over budget. I would 99% of them are over budget. And I was always asking myself the question, like, how can you even allow bids to go forward to allow these people to bid again in a second process for a second project if they went over budget the first time? Well, that's just standard. They're milking the tax money. It's just the way it is. There's kickbacks everywhere step down. You know, America's dirtier than all in the dirty country for politics and kickbacks. We're probably right near the top of the list there. They might try to pretend like it's not, but it is. So this thing's going to just, you know, wreak havoc on the economy for a minute here. And, you know, you were talking about this whole thing. So how does it blow in here? This is all Al Jazeera. China turns to AI in propaganda mocking the American dream. So AI is starting to shape Beijing influence campaigns, and that's a big thing to get the entire country to move one direction, whether it's a thought to like, hey, we don't like the Japanese, or hey, we don't like this product. Like nobody's allowed to use Apple products anymore, so everybody ditched everything Apple in like a single week. They had like book burning parties, but they had like Apple phone pileup parties, you know, where the people go out, yes, I support this day, and then throw their Apple phones into this big pile on the street. And things like the size of the Himalayan mountains, you know. But I did my part for the party and give me an extra boost on my social credit score. Make sure you got me on camera. So they try to put out this movie here, The American Dream, storm clouds over the urban landscape, where it was supposed to be a way for you to grow inequality and achieve your financial goals and the American dream. But they look at it now telling, this is funny. They said America is turning into a dystopian society as a result of unbalanced politics and economy and the American military-industrial complex. I'll let that sink in for a second. That's from China pointing at America saying we're becoming a dystopian society. Oh, that's funny. And I read this comically here and like, what is sheesh? And then they, you know, go on to talk about, you know, there's cheaper ways to manufacture goods, and they're like back to the homeland again. China's way better than America. So anyway, I'll leave it there. And we've definitely reached a turning point, especially when China is making fun of America for being too dystopian and the economy problems. And here we come into a massive economy problem right at the right time, coincidentally, where all the banking backstops just got removed. So the collapse is now going to be a full collapse. There will be no help coming. The cavalry ain't coming with bags of money to stop the bank failures.
That's all right. They got you protected. They got you protected. JP Morgan is going to launch a new biometric payment system. It's the next step in their Orwellian financial surveillance. So it's not like we're dystopic over here or nothing. I mean, it is funny, but China's got it right. I mean, they're telling the truth. It's not that they're not also one of those too, but they can point out very easily that we are. And that's what makes it easy for Russia to make propaganda too. There's so much craziness over here. And Putin had this one speech where he was talking about how their civilization has already gone through what ours has gone through. And it's hard to argue that fact. Eventually they rejected it. The wall came down. And right about that time when they looked like they were going to meet us halfway, we went in a 180 and went back towards, the other direction. And it is weird. I've talked to my son about that, where it's very bizarre, where it seems like the more Marxist communist countries are now the ones that used to claim to be the opposite of that in the free world. But here we are. It's really weird. It's not like, they're not ready for civilization to fall apart. New York City Mayor Adams reveals electromagnetic weapon detection system, and you're going to start seeing those everywhere. Government buildings, grocery stores, banks, and then combined with the biometrics. And remember, they got the biometrics to God knows how many millions of people that normally wouldn't have got, biometrics, and they have them all ready to be under thumb too. And you're going to look everywhere, and it's going to be no choice for you to involve yourself if you're going to interact with the payment system that they have set up. And at that point, then you're going to start seeing where they're going to start passing laws that says, for safety reasons, it's okay to discriminate against certain people because they have a greater risk of having something that they don't want happen in public, like being armed. What happens when a person that's totally legal to carry a weapon goes through there? Every time they're going to stop and make a big deal about it. And you just see these constitutional rights erode into nothingness, into irrelevance. This is the same guy that said, everybody was racist for not taking migrants. And then so many migrants came, he changed his tune. But, instead of admitting he was wrong, he doubled down on the idea, and we're just going to take property from other people, take resources from locals, from our own homeless, needy populations, and we'll give it to them as like a payment. It's almost like when the Vikings used to go visit Southern Europe, and, they would just have tribute waiting for them because they didn't want to pay through the nose to the Vikings, get their nose cut as punishment for not having their taxes ready. And this is kind of going to go the same way. They're just paying tribute to people to keep them there because we know that this has something to do with a fundamental change in the electoral college. And I know that there are people that are jumping up and down on both sides with different opinions on this idea of millions of new people coming. But no one can argue that things change when a new demographic shows up. And that's going to change for not only the newcomers, but the people that lived there before. And, when you have countries taking away farmland, of people that lived on and farmed on it forever, and then handing it away to either nature or millions of new people that are taking programs, resources that were meant for the citizens of those countries. Obviously, there's going to be agitation back and forth, but they're prepared. And that's why they're setting up this complete biometric system so that, the good boys and girls will take part in the new payment system, the new biometrics world ID, because that's what it amounts to, is a world ID that's tied to your money, your health care, everything. And it tracks whether or not only can you go somewhere, but when you go somewhere and how long you stayed there and where you shop. So we're getting micromanaged. It's all being set up. But, good news, geologists officially reject the Anthropocene epoch. So we're not ready to call the Holocene over yet. So that tells you they're not really done with their plan. So when they tell you that a new era has started, then you'll know that the plan is going forward. And then, you talk a lot about the banks. I came across this article from Brownstone Institute that is talking about the meltdown of commercial real estate. So what happens at the end of all this when you fast forward to all the private citizens, smaller companies, and other people losing control of the property that they own? Who ends up with that inevitably? It's like an AI system that keeps working a problem until it inevitably solves it. So the problem would be for the world elite, how do we retake and claim back all of the lands of the world? Keep in mind that only a couple hundred years ago, the idea of actual private property was just about not a reality, because the lords and the lordships and the kings and the queens and whoever else was whatever the title was for their area owned everything. And that is exactly where we're going back to that style of thing. And this sums it up right here. The wealth of the 1% just hit a record $44 trillion. And I put to you that when they talk about the 1%, that's not even a big deal. What the people that run the planet are really the 0.001%. The 1% right here are the people that still have holdings and businesses that produce stuff. So once this group of people decides that, they just want to take their money and run, then everything falls apart. But you can, don't worry about that. What we really need to worry about, according to the news, because I've seen like 5 copies of the same article, the next epidemic to spill over from China could be super gonorrhea, where antibiotics can't help you. And then like the very next article I see are STIs in seniors. Study reveals overlooked health crisis among adults over 50. Maybe they're going to get this new worry, because it's just so comical, the things that they come up with have nothing to do with the actual real problems of society, which is, a crumbling monetary system, crumbling infrastructure, the destruction of older values that were more, I guess, they were more beneficial to society in the way that it had a foundation that supported, problems that we come across like homelessness and stuff. There were eras when you could go back where there were basically not much tax in the United States. And for some reason, the homeless ate and the streets got paved, or at least cobblestone, depending on where you were at. Roads existed, and all these things happened because people did better. So they had more and they felt more charitable. Now, I don't know how that works into today's world, because, it's hard to transfer anything or do anything. But the good news is the Supreme Court ruled that the Amish can interstate sell their milk and cheese and stuff. So maybe we'll see an end to that. And then maybe we can culturally appropriate the Amish. I know we joked about this before, but if we culturally appropriate portions of their independent civilization that's living side by side with us, maybe we could do better and cut out all of these problems. Like, if you had an acre and it was producing enough food that you save that food in jars, and year after year you had a little bit of a surplus, when you see stuff like that bridge come down, you're like, oh well, that's sad that happened, but it really doesn't bother you other than that. And that's where we need to be. And, you were talking earlier about gold and having products afterwards. Somebody that owns a lot of silver can make a lot of products actually out of that. That's one of those things that, if everything falls apart, how much vegetables or meat do you think you can get for a gallon of colloidal silver that you have just about an endless supply to, only from a small amount of silver? Now, it's true, a lot of people will have silver, but not the common everybody. They're not going to have access to it. They're not even going to know that you could make the stuff out of that. So, you have a potential product there. And any other thing that you're growing, like say you have jars and jars of a certain kind of seed, that is everything gold is right there. That is gold. And if you have, obviously, in the personal defense system arena, parts, full products or the products that you need for that product, those are gold bars, because when you're looking out there in the realm of lawfare, they are trying to restrict citizens' rights to protect themselves with these defense mechanisms, but they've ruled that foreigners can, have those and no problem. Don't worry about them. So it's a really bizarre setup. They're setting up every aspect that they possibly can to get each group of people that identify as a certain individual thing to not like each and every other group or have some kind of grudge against them because they feel like something's unfair. That's the whole motivation that they use to move millions of people here, and it'll continue. And that's what's going to dissolve civilization right now. So I think a lot of people can just sit back and continue to pay their taxes and keep their legalities in order. And at the end, they might be just some of the rarest citizens living if somehow this, United States system continues and is functional, being the rarest people or rarest citizens, those that own their own land. I don't know. Land is also the gold, right? Because that's what obviously every corporation, billionaire, and government is after, to take back all of the land to get us back to a feudalist system, or at least a technocratic nightmare version of that. So it is funny that China would be joking about us being dystopic, but when you look around, they ain't half wrong.
I have an answer for you. Here it goes. 10.8% of Americans own gold. 11.6% of Americans own silver. Now, again, what quantities? But out of those, just 11.6%. How many have the proper electrical anode to get that colloidal silver out into your water/substrate? Not many, I'm sure, but how many could take that colloidal silver and then use it to put it on bandages, this sort of thing, like put it into a gel? That's another whole step up. So once you get silver into its form, whether it be powder or in the atomical structure in water, then how does that work? There's different levels of complexity and how can you use it for medicine moving up. MMS is another one, not a lot. Make sure you get your MMS kits. It's two different vials that you would drip together. You got to think, would the government really worry about only 10% of the population having something that could give them freedom off the slave plantation, off the planet plantation, off the farm earth plantation here, or allowed them to exist more comfortably in it? Like, what types of laws would be passed? Let's say there is some sort of financial setback, reset. We go to a digital central bank digital currency. At what point do they start then making laws that it's illegal to own physical silver? Because again, anytime there's a chance for a percentage of the populace to escape this system that holds them and extracts their energy as the payment, I firmly believe this whole thing invented for money was very much like the Matrix, to extract you as a battery. Your time, your energy, your thought, your life force, for a better term, is being extracted every day. You hump across that bridge to go to work in an office somewhere. Every time you need to punch that time card. Every time you need to get that report in on time to keep the behemoth corporations moving forward. You as a cog, named, unnamed, number in the wheel. At that point, will they come after the silver owners, the gold owners, like, oh, you have a way to be outside the system? Because I kind of had that thought when you were talking there for a minute. How long before this entire start to finish cycle resets and completes one more time? 600 years, 800 years? Because you mentioned it as soon as you said it, oh, they paved the cobblestone roads, I'm thinking, all right, 1400s. That's the narrative we're giving of linear time, that we came from the Roman era, and then somehow there was this 1,000-year period where people did zero, nothing. They even went backwards. Compressed air energy technologies, or compressed air technology for pneumatic devices, when it was invented and around during the Roman era. For those of you who didn't know that, compressed air energy technology existed in the Roman era. Yet somehow we forgot it. And it popped back up in the late 1600s, early 1700s. Like, where was that 1,500 years of no innovation on that technology which existed? So for me, it's a statistical impossibility that you have an existing technology and nobody would improve on it for 1,500 years, yet it pops back up in 17, I'll be generous and say 1700, and now we're using it to change tires on cars. Like that, even if I'll be generous and say 300 years. It took us that long to go from whatever they were squeezing some stuff off of a river in bell-shaped domes and then pushing something up to smash the corn to do whatever, okay? But it took 300 years to go from there to changing your tire pneumatically. Okay, that's 300 years. That's 5 times longer than zero happened with the Roman technology until 1700. 300 years to change your tires, and then somewhere we didn't do a single thing, which means for me, there's been several resets. And this whole thing about, off the king's land, you're a serf again. Just think about Magna Carta. When we come out of the serfdom period, at least that's what we're told. We come out of the serfdom period. Then each successive century, we started to get more and more rights until we broke away. We're free. And then what happens? Well, we're free to go work for the corporations and pay taxes, slavery under a different guise, but without the chains. And I'm talking about every race on this planet. Everybody who's alive is a slave into this planet Earth farm. You're cattle. We are all cattle, if for a better term. Unless you have a spacecraft, you are not escaping this farm that you're on. There's different management techniques for each different farming space called countries. But the way that they extract energy out of you is a good flip and an ebb and flow of the way the pendulum swings. Because Ransom was talking about, the American thing going on in the 1980s with the Russian thing going on, and then it collapsed, and then suddenly we've gone the reverse direction. It's gone the reverse direction, and eventually it's going to come to the apex where Russia will become America probably in another 15 or 20 years, and then we'll come into this total communist thing, and then we will collapse from the communism, and then the Russians will be way over there where we were in the 80s, and then they'll come back toward communism, and we will go back toward the sort of freer market outside systematic control of top-down plutocracy. And the pendulum just seems to be swinging over centuries like this. So my question is, how long was the last complete reset that we are told? 1400s? Because that might match up on 600-year intervals go back, or 700-year intervals. That would make more sense back to the Roman era. Well, they say it collapsed in 150 AD, but the full collapse finally where they even stopped using Roman coinage was around 400 AD. Okay, well that's a very complete dropping off the bell curve there when you're going from collapse into no longer even using the money or acknowledging anything from Rome. So 3 cycles of 700 years or 3 cycles of 600 years, that would give us 200 AD. Like, I'm just wondering how many times this cycle repeats itself. Coming from the serfdom, I mean, they can tell you anything of what our history was. That's why it's so difficult to find real manuscripts and really very concise recordings of history. And when we find one, they're always completely different than what the story we are being told is. Then, of course, they're mocked, or those things disappear, they're destroyed. And then we come up from serfdom, and then we're here with these freedom rights to work for a corporation, and then the full system is going to collapse again, absolutely. Time unknown in the next few years, whatever, give it a couple years. But that might take us all the way back to the completion of the cycle, and then everything gets reset. You'll own nothing, you'll be happy, and we're back to that serfdom point again. In terms of the historical perspective, the serfdoms, get off the king's land, the rewilding laws. Everything brings us back to that same exact point in the late 1300s, as it will after all these laws are completed. If the World Economic Forum continues with its rewilding and all these government establishments and globalists get their wild pipe dream, we are going to be back to literally serfdom again, literally serfdom. And I'm wondering if the story then 600 years or 700 years from now will be, well, they were serfs, and they finally repaved the cobble roads, and maybe we'll just repave our roads after the mud flood. I don't know. But anyway, there'll be some sort of, we had rudimentary infrastructure, and suddenly we come out of it and we get rights again. I'm wondering 600 years what kind of companies they will be working for after they fought for their rights to be free again. I'm wondering, Ransom, 600-year cycle, do you think? Because you put a lot of thoughts in my head with a few of those ideas.
I don't know. It seems like there's little smaller ones, like about every 70 years, that they also do to knock everybody back in place. And, you were talking about the air pressure and stuff that they used to have. And I was, that always makes me think of the Hero device. I think it's about 80 BC or something like that, which was basically the Industrial Revolution in a nutshell. And it makes you wonder, like, when people get to that point, is there someone that just shows up and says, no, don't do that, scrap that, I don't want you showing people that, don't spread that around? Because basically it was a steam engine 2,000 plus years ago, and that is what created the Industrial Revolution that created the world that we all live in right now. The one right before the technological revolution of digital computers and things like that, we had the first Industrial Revolution, which was completely steam powered and, fossil fuel powered. So obviously there's a reason why they want to cut back on all of that technology that came out of that era, because it proves that, not only can a nation build lots of things and lots of technological marvels with that, but they can do anything once started at that point, right? At the Industrial Revolution, whenever you have machines that are now powered, you can do almost anything. And I think that's the whole reason why they've been trying to cut back on everything fossil fueled, which will, reduce the amount of people that remember, know how to work, know the science behind it, know how to create the power. Because, there's lots of people out there that could strip 2 or 3 motors that don't exactly go together, put them together and make a generator that runs off of biofuel. No problem. There's plenty of those people. The problem that there is that most of those people are aging. And most of those people that are interested in those kind of things are not the generation that is about to inherit civilization, unfortunately. Most of those people are on the range, 45 plus at least, and that's giving a very generous estimate, because I think it's more like 50 plus of people that actually have the know-how, the skills, and know how to use the tools that go to those things. Those people are disappearing around the world. And, I just started watching, I know a lot of people probably watched it already, but Netflix has this show called The 3-Phase Problem. And the very first, I think 20 minutes of it is a scene right out of the Cultural Revolution or a little bit before that, where the Red Guard was basically, beating on a scientist for some of the ideas that he had. And it got to the point where even his wife, sold him out and said that his ideas were crazy and, all of that. And it was so kind of, I don't know if it was realistic, obviously, because I didn't live there, but from the stories that I've been told and the things that I've read and the people that have been interviewed that I've watched, it seemed to be a really real example of societal mass hysteria and how the young generation, once convinced of something, can completely revolutionize the world by destroying what was there before. And during that thing, they destroyed everything that was old, all of the books, all of the know-how. They were trying to get rid of it all. And then, 10 or 20 short years later, they were trying to sift through the ashes of what they destroyed so that they could start competing in a worldwide setting, because they realized that they got rid of all of those resources that they actually had. But that scene at the beginning of the movie was so real that, my girlfriend had to take her children out, which are our children, because she didn't want to see it. It was so, crazy what was going on. And unfortunately, that's a real thing. And when you think about a whole, generations of people that owe everything, they're tax slaves, they're debt slaves. And on top of that, they've been filled with nonstop Marxist propaganda. You can see that a turning point would have to happen where the older civilization has to deal with the younger, new civilization that's trying to replace them. The only problem now is it's government sponsored, world government sponsored. So at the very top, they're putting out all of these ideas that the young are latching onto, believing that the world is burning up and everything's going extinct, and you can't, be productive without hurting yourself, which is exactly opposite of every stride and invention and, new idea that has helped us creep up from the Stone Age to the point that we are. And it's obvious that the rulers of the world are willing to let all of that go just so they could keep their high-tech trinkets in a little mansion somewhere and run a vast swath of land with all of the wild humans living out there that need to be stamped and chipped so we can keep track of them, just like all of the other chattel or cheaple or whatever you want to call it. But you could be a good boy or girl and be a servant and live inside the little city. All you got to do is take part in their digital everything, their digital track and trace system. And of course, like a domesticated animal, you're going to have to take your, antibiotic shots and your other kind of shots. I didn't really want to say the real name of it, but you get the drift. You're going to have to take your medication just like a domesticated animal has to do. And what do they have to fear other than, massive people rebelling against them? They don't have to fear that if there's a mass die-off for different reasons and it's a incremental changeover to this new system. They don't have to worry about that. But what they do have to worry about is those individuals out there that absorbed the knowledge from the previous generations. That's what they have to worry about, the people that know how to work that oil.
Can we talk about the manosphere next week? The Australian government spending $2 million to address man-fluencers like Andrew Tate. Sheesh. Take out the string. Easy to overthrow a nation then. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next week. Bye for now.
Thank you for listening to Revolution.